So hang on a minute. Hang on. I'll put the silverware on here then. You guys can separate this when you go up.
Good morning, everybody. We are just waiting for a few more people on the district's end to join our Zoom, and we will begin shortly. And we also do see that people are continuing to join under the participants box. Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Polinchuk. I'm the superintendent of Lewisburg Area School District. On our panel today, we have Pamela Craner, who is the supervisor of special education, and Ms. Kathy Moser will be joining us as well. She is the assistant superintendent shortly. I know I still do see people coming on board. Just to remind everyone, this is being recorded, as well as the other sessions, the general sessions that we had for each of the grade level bands. This is a specific session for our elementary parents who have children who have IEPs or 504s. What I will share today is a combination of what was shared in those other Zoom sessions. I'm not sure if everybody had the opportunity, so I do apologize if some of this is repetitive. However, throughout that presentation, I will be speaking about what is special and unique in terms of how we are going to approach the education and the needs of the students who require these additional services. So if you bear with me for just a second, I will move to the shared screen. They've had a couple problems with this, so it might take me just a second to get it up and running. I do want to also remind everybody that there's the chat and the question and answer session. So that would be a place where you may ask some questions regarding how we plan to program in general for students. It will be difficult for us to answer any questions about a specific student's IEP. I will say from the outset that will occur with the IEP team meeting. Okay, Kathy, if you could just confirm, please, that my screen is up and it's running. Okay.
It's on the title page, yes.
And did it advance?
And it advanced.
Perfect. Okay. So the format will be for today, I will give about a 20-minute to 30-minute presentation going over what the reopening plans are for the district. All of this is with the caveat that if conditions change or we receive different direction from the Department of Education or the governor, then we do have alternative plans should this become a more restrictive situation for all schools. But this is what we plan to do for the opening of school as of right now. Flexibility is really key in this situation. Then I'll also provide some information about additional options the parents may want to seek. I think it's important for you as a parent to be able to have all of the information as well as some questions that you may want to ask if you're seeking anything outside of what the district is offering for your child's education. And then, of course, what our next steps are and to answer any questions. So we know that our students who are going to be returning to us experienced an abrupt change in what they consider to be normal, coming to school, the relationships that they had with their teachers, the relationships they had with their peers, other individuals that were working with them. And we also know that the students who were receiving the remote education that we provided in the spring were, in many cases, depending upon the student's needs, it was very difficult because this might be more hands-on with the student. And of course, the teachers, the staff members were not there to be able to do that. And, you know, when we come to the academics, we understand that students may have some challenges and they may need things to be explained over and over or in a different way or broken down even further for them to be successful. We understand all of that. So as any child would have been experiencing tantamount to a kind of trauma. It's just something unexplained happened and it changed their universe and they're struggling to understand what happened. There may be a little bit of fear. There may be, you know, that feeling of missing friends, some isolation, and all of that is happening at the same time. So we know when our students come back into the classrooms, we have to be prepared to help them move through what happened last year so they can be in a good place to learn this year. And I think that when we go through here, this will help to help parents understand why we're looking for in-person instruction. Again, if it can be done safely, which is what we believe we can do, but being in the classroom with the teachers, with their peers, is important not just for their academic progress, but also for their social and emotional development as youngsters. So why the plans are coming so late? We're really not late. We've known we had to reopen schools well right after the day they closed, to tell you the truth, but what we did not have is the guidance as to what that would be. We didn't know when it would occur. We didn't know what guidelines or rules of the road, shall we say, would be in place for schools to reopen safely, even if they could reopen for in-person instruction. That really did not become available to us until actually July 16th, when we got the specific guidelines of how to build our health and safety plans. We were also waiting for direction on how we could count remote instruction that might occur, either in the initial plan or some plan down the road, for the required number of days and hours of instruction. And along with that, we had the masking order that came about, which, while coming from the Department of Health, has been further clarified for how that applies to schools. So what has come out in general for the public, for people walking around in the community, it can be different in schools, and that has been through the efforts of the Department of Education and the Department of Health to refine those guidelines for schools so that they can open. Okay, so we do have to have a board-approved health plan, and it was reviewed by internal stakeholders, which included administrators, members, representatives of our teaching staff, as well as our different support staff groups. Our school nurses were a part of this, and experts from Evangelical Hospital, Geisinger Medical Center, and Union County's Health Department. So we had some recommendations and tweaks. So we're in the process of making that. In early August, our plan will be put forth to the board in a special meeting for approval. One of the things that's different from last year to this year is that when we were under the continuity of education, where school districts could provide enrichment or remediation or present new content, the legislature passed a law that was signed by the governor, Act 13, which allowed school districts the flexibility to step away from what traditional school would look like and not be responsible for the same number of hours and days that were required in law. That expired on June 30th. So as of right now, we have to follow what is in PA code, which is that students have to report or have school for 180 days. and they have to have 900 elementary instructional hours and 990 secondary hours. And so all the plans have to have a process for accounting for student attendance for 900 hours, at least for our elementary students. And with that are a few other caveats, because this is all what's in Pennsylvania code, that all the instruction has to be directed by a certified teacher. And all provisions of FAPE, which is specifically to our students with special education, have to be met. So we do have to provide speech and language services. We do have to modify instruction using the specially designed instruction that is listed in the IEP, other related services that need to be provided. Some of these are challenging because for some of our students that require one-to-one support in a remote environment, that's very difficult to deliver. In an in-person environment, it's possible to do that. And that's one of the reasons that we're pushing for that in-person instruction. We know that it is very difficult for a district to provide the services the students need in a remote environment. We are using all of the guidelines that are coming from the Department of Education and Health, focusing on the Department of Education, any orders from the governor, of course, and what our local experts are recommending based on what the spread of the disease is here in Union County in this region. We can't be concerned about what Philadelphia or Pittsburgh are doing because they're more densely populated and they have to make different plans based on the number of cases that they have. Fortunately, we're still low, even though we're increasing a little bit. That can all change between now and the start of school or at any point during the school year. So we have to be prepared for that, and I believe that we will be. Also, all of these guidelines are really coming initially from the CDC. In some respects, the Department of Education has made it more flexible for us to be able to provide that instruction in school with more specifics of what should be inside of a plan. Moving on, so these are the 4 options we're working on. I shouldn't say options. The 2 here that are not highlighted in gray, they are actually what we're planning for right now today. These other 2 plans are our contingency plans if something changes. So for in-person learning, we're looking at 5 days a week with an early dismissal on Wednesdays after lunch. This would enable the custodians to have additional time for cleaning. They clean the schools every day, bathrooms, classrooms, everything. But most of that cleaning always happens in the second shift. So this gives additional time for them to hit some of those other zones that they maybe are, would be hard pressed to get all of that completely finished during a Monday or a Tuesday. So we know that's important. This is also an opportunity for our professional staff, because they will still be here for their contractual day, to have many of the meetings that they normally have in the morning or in other times during the school schedule to talk about students' needs, professional learning, things of that nature, because they are going to have to supervise the students from the time they walk into the building. And we won't have those congregate areas for the students anymore. Their kids need to go straight to the classrooms. So we need to still build that time. And so all of those other responsibilities that our staff has, can still be accomplished. Face coverings are going to be required for all students and staff. And our staff will be wearing face shields. If closer to a student, we'll ask them to have the masks. The masks are the best protective measure that we can take. The face shield still will give that same protection if also at a distance, which most of the time teachers will be. We know that many of our students do need to see the faces of their teachers and staff. Much of what we communicate comes through our expressions, learning to read, watching the mouth, demonstrating how sounds are formed, how the lips move, where the tongue is when the sound's being made. All of that's really important for our students, and we want to make sure that their instruction isn't being impeded by the safety measures. We do know that there are some students for whom a mask will be very difficult. They may not be able to tolerate it being on their faces. They may have a health condition that really compromises their ability to function. We certainly wouldn't put a mask on a student who then becomes so uncomfortable that they start to become ill or are not able to pay attention to the learning, or it starts to create a set of behaviors that can be dangerous or problematic. Those will all be addressed within the IEP, because if we can document a health condition, or we have data about how a student learns best and or what their disability is, and the recommendations that have been coming through, and many of these are coming through legal counsel that are helping us to find a way to still be compliant with what our plans would be and the laws and the order of the governor with the masks, but also to understand that our students with special needs, we need to be flexible and adaptable, because the most important thing for them to be focusing on while they're in school is learning. And parents shouldn't feel worried that their child will have an outburst because of some dispute over whether the mask needs to be on, because the child just simply can't have the mask. Other mitigation techniques will be in place as well. It's not just the mask, it's the mask plus social distancing. It's the mask plus hand washing, sanitation, all of these different things, all layered on top of each other, are the things that we believe will be able to keep students safe. Parents would still be able to come in for an IEP meeting, but we are looking where we can to be able to do these things virtually. It would depend on the meeting, of course. And if it's something, and I hate to say as routine, but there isn't a significant concern or dispute in terms of what's being presented in the IEP, and we can do that through a Zoom remotely, then that is absolutely possible. Obtaining electronic signatures, all of these things that many of you may have experienced in the spring, we will still continue to do, because we're trying to protect the students within the schools to make sure that we're not, introducing too many new people into the building, and, of course, diminishing some of our mitigation techniques. The other option for parents is the Lewisburg Area School District eSchool for virtual learning. This is a program where we contract with the Central Susquehanna Intermediate Unit. When you hear about area school districts offering their eSchool, this is the same program that many of them are using. School districts have options on which kind of curriculum they would want to use. The instruction would be delivered by the vendor's teacher, not necessarily our teacher. That can shift depending upon how many people select the eSchool option as opposed to the in-school option. So we want people to understand that from the outset, that it may not be the teacher that you have been used to working with your student or your students used to, and you would be in the virtual environment. In the virtual environment, the student is home. The teacher does not come to the home. We still do have to provide FAPE, and that would be in tandem and in partnership with that vendor. They can modify a curriculum for the specially designed instruction for students who are receiving learning support, but it's going to be a little bit different than what you would experience if you're in person. So I just recommend to parents that they really consider what the needs of their students are. Talk about that with the case manager. Certainly Pamela Kramer has been having many conversations with parents about what the best option might be. And we completely respect and understand that these are decisions that you're making based on concerns over your child and your family's health, that you may not otherwise be considering a virtual option if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. We completely understand that. The hybrid learning would be if the conditions change in Union County, we start to see more spread of the virus in this area. And if we are ordered to move to 50% capacity, similar to how now restaurants can only have 25% capacity for in-person dining. That was reduced in the recent order. So if we're ordered to do that, we would just still have our elementary students come in. Everything that I will share in terms of how we're keeping students and staff safe would remain intact. but our elementary students would be in just spread amongst the 4 different schools, and our secondary students would be remote, and we would follow the same schedule. Remote learning is in the event that schools are ordered to shut down. And that would be synchronous learning with the teachers. So that means we would have a regular fixed schedule for some of our students that's helpful. And we are exploring options on how to be able to support our parents who would be working or really had struggled to be able to help their students with the technology and some of the learning that they needed to do at home in the spring. So other options, and I want parents to really have a good sense as they're making these decisions. And again, we know where these decisions and why these decisions are being made, and we perfectly support and respect your position and your rights as a parent. If you choose our e-school, you are still connected to the school district. And that's the most important thing that I can share about this. The student is not withdrawn. They're just assigned to the e-school. It's easier to ease back to the regular in-person instruction if conditions change or parents, feel more comfortable with what the district's doing based on, things that they're hearing or that they're seeing. They still can participate in clubs and activities. They still would receive the district services that we do provide. They receive a district report card if it was a secondary student, a diploma if they were a graduating senior, and they receive instruction from a certified teacher. And parents would still get all of our communications. That's a benefit to the district as well. There is a financial benefit to staying with the district, but also because we stay connected with our families. And that's very important for us to continue to do. Other options for parents. So there are cyber charter schools and brick and mortar charter schools, as well as private schools. So the tuition is free. That is true if you choose a brick and mortar charter school or a cyber charter school to the parent. The district pays the tuition. For e-school, it's approximately $4,000 to $5,000 a student for the entire year. For a student with an IEP, it's $24,000 a year approximately, depending upon the grade level. And the district pays that, but that comes out of the district's operating budget. So that means that less dollars will go to our programs and services within the district. And that's where the concern comes in from the district. It does not necessarily mean that a parent's option to do that if they feel like that's the right thing for them, that we will be angry about that. We really want parents to understand that if it's a cyber charter or it's our e-school, the difference is you're connected with us. If you go to the cyber charter, then you're connected with just that charter and how they deliver services. We don't intervene on the part of that. If there's some concern or something that happened that you did find was beneficial to your student and they cannot replicate, we can't make them do it. So, it's something really to think about. If it's a private school, then the parent does pay the tuition on his or her own. In terms of certifications, it is different with charter schools. They are only required to have up to 75% of their teachers certified. In Pennsylvania, in order to be a teacher in a public school, you need to have a certification, and specifically a special education certification to teach special education students. Many of our teachers who are special education students also have certifications in general education areas as well. Private schools do not have specific requirements, but they may individually under their charters. It's not mandated by the state. And most of these institutions, in all honesty, do have certified teachers. They may not all be certified in Pennsylvania. They may have more than 75% in the charter, but this is in terms of their requirements. So the difference is you will have a certified teacher if you're working with the school district. Mitigation requirements are recommended for private schools, but they're not mandated. And there are requirements for a brick and mortar charter school as well. But that's a good question to ask if you're looking at a private school. What are going to be the safety measures that they have? They may follow exactly what our Department of Education is putting out. They may be doing something else. So you want to make sure you're comfortable with that. Enrollment. you're no longer enrolled with the district. So all responsibility moves to that private school if they are able to deliver some of those services your child needs. Some may not, or the cyber charter school. And in order to come back to Lewisburg Area School District, you would need to re-enroll. Homeschooling is another option that's out there, and homeschooling has been around for a long time. This is where parents, for whatever reason, choose to educate their kids on their own. We as a district are required to know that all compulsory age students are receiving some sort of education, whether it's in school, as most do, or to track those students that are in homeschooling. So there is an application process where the parent explains what the goals in the program will be for the student. There's a homeschool program coordinator, which is the parent. In addition, with that application, a certified special education teacher or supervisor would need to sign off on the plan to make sure that some of those elements of instruction for the IEP or to meet the needs of the students based on what that student's disability may be, needs to have that sign off. That can be by a district person, or it can be by somebody that the parent finds independently. There is a independent and private homeschool evaluation, and that is simply where the parent provides a portfolio of what the student has done, and that homeschool evaluator then certifies that the parent did, yes, meet the goals with the student. If the students continued with homeschooling, they receive a diploma from PDE for homeschooling. That can have implications for future educational choices. The district is not required to provide FAPE at that time either, and that's important to know. So when you're homeschooling, you're not attached to the district. So that's, again, where parents are more on their own to secure those services. Curriculum materials, we can offer the printed curriculum that we have for the courses and textbooks, but we don't have an obligation to do more than that. We are wanting to be supportive of parents, and we don't have to, because the law says the minimum is the copy of the curriculum and any textbooks, but we will be as supportive as we can. Many parents form consortiums where they join together. The students have those opportunities for socialization, and the parents would then be able to maybe teach a group of students based on whether they're more comfortable with math or reading or whatever the case might be. But that is an option for parents as well. So what we are going to dive into quickly here are all the precautions, and I will kind of add a little bit about what that might mean for your student in elementary who has some special needs, and what some of the things would be that we will be doing in order to make, if they're in person, to make that transition for them, because this is a change in the rules and the expectations and the routines that they're very used to. We know some students may need some help with that transitioning and support. So there's 4 major precautions that are part of the plan. And again, that's masking. And again, when we talk about a specific student, that would be part of an IEP discussion. It may be an alternative type of face covering or even a face shield if that's something the student can tolerate and function with. But again, that's all an IEP decision. Social distancing is a big piece of this, keeping kids as far away from each other and adults, and to just be mindful of that space, that they're not as close anymore as they used to be. Washing hands or sanitizing hands frequently, and cleaning and sanitation. We also know that air ventilation and filtration has a lot to do with the overall health of the air and the air quality in a building. So we are exploring options for upgrading our systems to pull all these particles, not just viruses, which we have all the time. Every year there's a flu or a stomach bug, but certainly allergens as well. So it's a permanent solution to an ongoing issue of just, a bug running through a school and kids getting sick, or it's really bad allergy season. Making that change to our filtration systems would also be beneficial for years moving forward. This is the most important thing. If kids are feeling ill and they have a temperature, it's going to be okay to keep them at home. Even if they don't have, or it might not be coronavirus, they still may be ill with something else that's just going to make it really tough for them to make it through the day and pay attention to their learning. And if they are somewhat sick, again, their immune systems are kind of fighting something off, so they're a little more compromised. We are hoping to have this health and safety forum in early August with medical experts to provide parents with more information about what the school's doing as well, and why those things, why we chose the recommendations from our local officials to follow, again, aligned with what's required by the Department of Ed, and any questions they may have as they're moving through the community. Okay, so masking and social distancing. And again, I've spoken about masks. I'll be happy to answer questions. The important thing to know is that if there's a concern there with your student, that's going to be part of an IEP discussion. Social distancing, we're looking for everything to be at least 6 feet apart to mark the desks, the ground where the desks would be, how to stand 6 feet apart, much like when you go to the grocery store and you're in the queue to check out, it's telling you where to stand. All of those things that you see out in the community, we will be doing, but doing much more aggressively, because we're dealing with a number of students who, they need a lot of reminders on what they're going to need to do. All of the spaces, the hallways, the cafeterias, auditoriums, everything will be modified and adapted in some way to increase distance between students up to 6 feet. We are looking at plexiglass desk shields to be issued to all the students. And again, this might be something that it's issued. If it's problematic for your child, then that may not be one of the strategies we'll use. There's a large range of students with IEPs. For some students that are in a learning support environment and are included in general education classes, they will have the same access to the preventative measures as other students. If we're in a more self-contained classroom, we're going to have to adapt that based on what the students' needs are. And teachers will be planning for this, thinking about this. If they have questions about what cannot happen, they certainly have the support of Pamela Kramer, Kathy Moser, and myself. And all of this really needs to include dialogue with the parents. You're going to want to know what's going to be different, maybe for your child, just because of what helps them best learn. Using outdoor and alternative spaces and reduced cafeteria seating. So kids may be rotating between half of, like, let's say a grade level, maybe in the cafeteria, and the other half maybe outside or back in the classroom. That's all going to be school specific, depending upon the age of the students and what the available space looks like. Now, before arriving to school, we're going to ask parents to do a health screening with their children. And so they would be going through a couple of questions. How do you feel? Runny nose, sore throat, anything like that. And of course, as a parent, they're letting you know that from the time that they woke up, but taking the temperature is a piece of that. And depending upon if there's a temperature and if they have one or they have more of these symptoms, we're asking you to keep the children home. If a child starts to become ill during the day, the nurse will take the temperature and assess the symptoms. That's what the nurses normally do anyway. First thing they do is take a temperature. And then if any students are arriving late, we'll treat them like how we're treating visitors coming into the building with the health screening and temperature taking. If symptoms do develop during the day, then what we would do is the nurse would isolate the student and mask them. Of course, the nurse will have in her protocols, if there's something different that needs to be done for the student because of the masking, if it's in their IEP not to have it, then they'll have to modify that, but they will be isolated until the parent can be reached. You'll be recommended to have your child see their primary care practitioner. We will ask that if students have a temperature or they have symptoms, that until they're gone in at least 72 hours, that they stay home. Now, if the student, let's say, had a sore throat and a fever and it turns out to be strep throat, as soon as the temperature is gone and the student's on a course of antibiotics, then certainly they can return if they're feeling well enough. but that we know it's not a possible COVID case, a suspected COVID case at that point. We know it's strep throat. Keep in mind that a lot of these symptoms, cough, runny nose, headache, nausea. Nausea is something we're seeing more in children as a symptom than we are in adults. Diarrhea as well. They happen anyway with other ailments that kids have. So it doesn't mean just because the child feels poorly that immediately it must be COVID and you're concerned about that. It very likely could just be the normal things that kids get, but we're taking these extra steps just to make sure that that's the case. And that would be the same for the staff. So what happens if somebody has a positive case? And many people have asked this question. So if we suspect or we learn of a positive case, Ms. Moser and I are the only two people in the district who can reach out to the Department of Public Safety, which is in Union County here. They then take over the case. They would do the contact tracing, any notifications, and any recommendations for quarantining. It isn't something that we do ourselves. And that's important for all parents to know. I'm not making a decision about quarantining because there might be a suspected case. That all goes through the Department of Public Safety. They may or may not let us know who all the people are that were part of a contact tracing. The way this information tends to be, it's like you get to know what you absolutely need to know. And if there's no reason for me to know, they will not share that with me. Remember that, everybody's still covered by HIPAA. I cannot release personally identifiable information about a student's education plan, as well as the student's health situation. So if a communication ever had to go out to the community, that would be done along with the Department of Public Safety and our solicitor, so that we're only releasing what we're legally able to release. So somebody calls me and says, I heard that so-and-so went home sick. Is it a COVID case? I can just say that person, went home ill. I just repeat the information they have. I cannot confirm that it was COVID. I cannot confirm that someone's being quarantined or anything like that. Because we're asking people to stay home for 72 hours, again, staff included, you will have a lot of absenteeism, and we're going to need to be flexible with our absentee policy, which is something that we're looking to do. Contact tracing is like this. It depends upon the length of potential exposure, what mitigation techniques were used, and the display of symptoms. So it doesn't mean, let's say that a person in a building contracts COVID, that all of a sudden the entire school is quarantined or that entire classroom. The contact tracing questions will look at this and then recommend quarantine if necessary, because perhaps they shared the same materials, they were touching the same equipment, and it might have not been sanitized afterwards. For some reason, a mask wasn't on, that kind of thing. Kids will not be penalized, and we do if they do end up in a situation where they have to be quarantined. And again, this may happen because of something that happens outside of school as well. We will still continue to work with the student to be able to have that continuous education, much like we would if they're out sick. Or going on a family vacation and getting assignments to them and working with them. We will continue to do that. Quarantine is, again, that period of time when an individual self-isolates to see if symptoms are developing, or can even be waiting for test results. But that determination is not made by the school district. Many illnesses, as I said, have similar symptoms. So the best thing to do is keep the child home if they're not feeling well, definitely if they have a temperature, and contact your primary care practitioner. Transportation. So if there is related service, if your related services include specialized transportation, that would still be occurring. That's part of the IEP. There may be some modifications that occur for the health and safety measures. So that might be, just spreading out more on a bus. But, those things we're very aware of. Please understand that we just in general in school districts do not have specific guidance on how regarding any transportation yet. We don't know how social distancing applies to that. We're waiting for that guidance to come. So this is as of now, we'd have 2 students on a bus, or on a seat, I'm sorry, And family members will be seated together. The bus drivers will have face shields and masks. Students have to wear their face coverings getting on, during, and after they get off the bus. Again, if there's anything in their IEP, and I should mention, I keep saying IEP, but also a 504 service plan, that again is still in force. They're technically in school the minute they step onto the bus. So anything that needs to happen in terms of those two documents would occur on the bus. They'll have assigned seats, and the buses will be loaded so that the kids move to the back. And then as the bus fills, they're sitting in the seats forward, and then in reverse order when we're doing our afternoon runs. The buses will be cleaned after every run. We are encouraging parents, if they can, to drive their students to school. This will just help us with making sure we have those two students to the seat. And again, any parents that might be concerned about the bus and not necessarily what's happening in school so much, if you're able to drive your students, we're encouraging that. Arrival and dismissal, students will be going directly to their classrooms. If your students were in a holding area, let's say, where there's an area in the building where they all met and waited until they were dismissed to their classrooms or their teachers came to pick them up, they are going directly to the classrooms. The teachers will be in the classrooms. So the kids will always be monitored. Each school is developing a plan for how it works in their building based on the rooms, the hallways, all of those things. If parents are dropping off, we're also modifying our arrival and pickup if they're car riders, just because we know we may have more traffic that way, but we also want to stagger dismissal out of the classroom so that we're not creating bottlenecks of kids waiting to get onto buses or into cars. And that may include reporting to some different locations, different doors, to be able to spread people out a little bit more. Classrooms will also have minimal furniture. And we need that in order to have that space that we need between the desks. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways with all of this. If your child requires special furniture because of their need, they will still have that. So that should not be a concern for parents. There's a way that we can calculate based on the square footage of the room, how many desks can fit in there. But the little carpet areas and some of those things that we see in the elementary schools, that stuff is coming out of many of the classrooms. They'll have the desk shields, as I shared. Sharing materials will be eliminated if not limited, depending upon what those materials are. And either way, things that kids are touching in common will be sanitized and hand washing before and after use. Large group spaces will be used throughout the day. Special subjects like physical education, music, they may be in alternative locations or outside, and we'll modify some of the activities because it may require kids to be so close together that that's not going to be practical. If students are spending some time together, maybe doing a lab or looking at the same piece of equipment, it would be limited to no more than 5 minutes with some face covering. We may need to make some adaptations for kids that cannot have any kind of a face covering at all, and try and replicate that experience for the student, but perhaps in a different way. And that's not just for the student, but it's also the protection of the other students. Hallways will be modified with one-way traffic. Bathrooms, of course, kids are going to have access to bathrooms, but we're really going to monitor how many students would be in there at a time so that we don't have crowding. Backpacks, kids will have their belongings with them at the desk. Again, teachers may make some modifications to this based on their classroom spaces and the needs of the students. Water fountains, we're looking at just using the touchless water fountain feature. The spigots, if the students need to fill their bottle, that'll be monitored by the teacher, but they are not going to be able to put their mouths near them to get a drink of water. Group seating will be modified. Nurse's office visits, of course, if students need to visit the nurse to get medication or to be checked for some reason that's part of a 504 service plan or within their IEPs, they still will be able to do so. This is the normal, I have a little paper cut and I need a Band-Aid kind of thing, that, we'll have those supplies so that other staff can take care of that. That doesn't necessarily require the nurse. We know that there may be kids who are feeling ill, and we just want to keep those students that are feeling ill at the nurse's office away from other students, but the nurses are looking at their space so that they can still deal with the traffic of the student who might be coming down for their medication or to have something checked as part of, you know, their health plan, their individualized health plan. And if students need to call home, we're looking at how they're using the school phone. If they have a cell phone, again, this is more older students, you know, they'd be permitted to use that with the staff members' presence. Cleaning and sanitation, we're going to be wiping down all high-touch surfaces. Again, our evening crew would be doing most of this, so this won't be something that people would see as much during the day, and it doesn't make sense to do that while the kids are sitting in the desks. We'll use EPA-approved disinfectants. In terms of any health concerns that students may have, we'll certainly have a list of what those are, and if parents want to have that checked out by their healthcare providers, that would be, you know, encouraged to do, to make sure we're not creating a secondary issue where they're being irritated or affected by the disinfectant. We're using electrostatic sprayers and misters. These are equipment where they spray an entire room and really get into the nooks and crannies that just humans wouldn't do as they're cleaning. Other technologies, again, the air ventilation that I spoke of, students will only be using soap and water and towels for wiping and cleaning. They would not be asked to use Clorox wipes or any kind of chemicals. And there will be signage all over the place about proper hygiene, as well as the directions they need to follow about social distancing and face coverings. Students will have lunch and recess, and we do have scheduled mask breaks. At lunch, as I mentioned, we may have rotations. We're still offering meal service to students. It will be simplified for easy transport to a classroom or outside or another location. These procedures will be being developed by the principals right now, and they'll be shared with the staff. We know that we're going to have to teach our students along the way and remind them many times this is how it's going to be different from what their experiences were in the past, and to help reinforce that for them. It may even be with our younger ones practicing some of the things that they need to do, so that we're not expecting first graders to come in and to totally understand what all of this means. We know we have to explicitly teach it to all of the students. Masking, so they can have masking breaks. In the PDE guidelines, when they're eating and they're at least 6 feet apart, they can take their masks down. If they're seated at their assigned desks or workstations and at least 6 feet apart, they can have a mask break there. We will have structured mask breaks where, okay, everybody, it's time to do this under the direction of the teacher. And we may take them outside or into another space and make sure they're well 6 feet apart and give them that time to have that masking break. This is going to be particularly important in our elementary schools and middle school, where we know that there is not air conditioning, particularly if we're hit with some pretty warm weather at the end of August and into September. Hand washing and sanitizing before eating and then after eating. And the recess procedures are going to be revised a little bit so that students, we can have social distancing, so certain groups of students can have access to this equipment on this day and other equipment on another day in some rotation. Any balls or hula hoops or anything like that that the kids touch, they then need to be sanitized after use. Other restrictions, so non-essential visitors will be limited. We're looking at health screenings, very similar to what you might have experienced going into a doctor's office or something, where you're asked a series of questions and then your temperature's taken. Required to wear face coverings or masks. Same thing with volunteers. If you're coming in for an IEP meeting, know that that would be part of the procedure because you're a visitor at that point. And again, in terms of non-essential visitors, this is, you have business in the school district in terms of talking about your child's education. So this is, this would be considered essential and not non-essential. But again, where we can do video conferencing, that would be the best method. Field trips are postponed, clubs may be virtual. Facility use by outside groups will be restricted so our custodians can focus on cleaning. and guest speakers will be restricted to just conducting virtual sessions instead of in person. Again, they're not essential to have. So that concludes the presentation pretty much. We are going to develop a frequently asked question guide for parents, staff, and students, and the students developmentally appropriate. We're updating our website with a number of resources, and we will be surveying parents by the end of the week on transportation if they intend to drive their students to school, or we're taking the bus, and what their intentions are with the Lewisburg Area School District e-school or some other options, so that we can start our planning with classroom assignments and all of the other things that need to happen. So I'm going to open it up to questions here.
Dr. Polinchuk, I can read them to you
Okay, fantastic.
and answer some perhaps that I can as well.
Mhm.
The very first one asks if masks will be provided. And of course, we're saying, yes, we will have masks available for our students. The second part of the question asks if it's got a specific requirement as to type of mask.
Right. So we know that with little kids, it's probably better that they have something that hooks around their ears or that might tie. I have one where it ties on two ends, or, there's some kind of elastic, something where it'll definitely be pretty sturdy on their face. Cloth is, from what we're hearing, and again, I'm not a medical expert, but this is what I'm hearing from the expert, cloth is better than the paper, and it actually is a little bit more comfortable. The other thing that we may need to do is have kids practice with the masks. I don't like wearing a mask, just like everybody else doesn't like wearing a mask, but the more I've worn a mask, the more comfortable I've gotten, to the point that sometimes I've gotten into the car and I'm driving and I forgot that I even still have my mask up. So it may be something, and again, to practice for 10 minutes and then increase, for 2 days, 3 days, and then increase to 15 minutes. It's developing a tolerance and a stamina. But we do need to know the kids need breaks. The Lifting Up Lewisburg campaign is, working on creating, they're sewing nice handmade, which are fine, masks that are in colorful colors. Kids can, if they have their favorite superhero, if you can sew, if they have a favorite t-shirt or something that they like, a costume from Halloween at some point, whatever it might be, and you can convert that into a mask because they're more likely to wear it because they like it. It's looks like something a child would wear. We encourage that. It doesn't have to be a surgical mask. We will have masks, and we know that they're kids and they can lose their masks, or they can, can get destroyed in the course of the day. We'll have something to give them for certain. We have over 10,000 masks in the district now, and that doesn't seem to be a supply that is of the PPE that is difficult to get right now. It's other PPE for actual hospital workers.
Thank you. The next one asks about when a bus schedule will be sent out, and I've just confirmed with Mr. Fairchild, bus schedules come out August 7, and so there's a date that I can share with everyone. The next question says that from yesterday's Zooms, the possibility was raised of changing the opening day, having a day later for some grades than other grades. Do you want to comment to that?
Yeah, so that is something the board would have to approve, that the change in the calendar, because the calendar is board approved. It is something as an administrative team that we'll have a definitive answer on by the end of the week. One of the things that we know is that the students who would be new to the school, those, incoming fourth graders, definitely the students going to middle school and going to the high school, they didn't have their orientations, at least the secondary students. So to give them a chance to have their orientation, and also they're in brand new buildings. So, explaining to the students, well, this hallway or that classroom, they don't have any idea what that is. So they would have an opportunity to learn the building, and for us to really intentionally teach the students about what they're going to need to do in terms of their social distancing and, hand washing, how to go about all those things. We're going to explicitly teach that, particularly to the younger students. And we know parents have been doing this all along, just to be able to move about in the community. But we want to make sure all the kids are comfortable with that.
Okay, very good. Teacher assignments, when do they come out is a question in the box, and I just confirmed with Mr. Rule. Teacher assignments, look for those in the mail by August 4. So August 4 mailing for that one. The next question, Dr. Polinchak addresses the reality that it's often warm in our classrooms in late August and early September.
Mhm.
Last year, this particular parent had to pick up their child early on some multiple days because of heat. Perhaps a few general comments about the heat.
So we've had many questions about, putting air conditioners into each classroom. And one of the challenges that we have that we cannot control and fix between now and the beginning of school is the electrical overload. If we put the kind of powered air conditioners that we needed to into the rooms, it'll blow the circuits. And so you're going to have power outages, and, potentially that can even create even more serious damage that would make the school unoperational. So that's one of the reasons why we're not doing that. The district predating me coming to the district did explore air conditioning. There's a significant cost to that isn't, even if the board entertained that, it would be months and months and months of it's not just throwing in the air conditioning. There's a lot of work they'd have to do behind the walls and upgrading all the electrical systems to do it. So we know that it's not going to be in place. I can say that with certitude. Teachers will be able to open up their windows, and many of them have box fans. It circulates the air a little bit. We know it's fresh air, albeit it's hot. We're pulling in hot air from the outside. One thing that we haven't done historically here in the district, but could be a consideration, if we got a day like, I'm thinking Monday, where it was 100 degrees still at 5:30 at night, that we may go with an early dismissal just because it's getting too hot. And we know the kids have masks on, and it will be a continuous struggle with the kids. We have to think about it just like when they started seeing it snow. Once they see the snowflakes, that's it. They're finished. They're ready to go home, and they want to go home and play in the snow. So we have to keep in mind that it's going to be so uncomfortable. Nobody's going to really be able to do the things that they need to do in order to keep themselves safe and to learn. And that's something that we may plan to do to be able to alleviate the lack of air conditioning.
All right. The question that is typed here next addresses what's the reality of being able to be 6 feet apart in some classrooms. Some class sizes are a little larger numbers wise. So will they need to be masked while seated at their desks is the question.
Okay. So the way the guidelines read is that you have to, being masked and 6 feet apart is optimal. But if you are definitely 6 feet apart, you can release the mask. And my suggestion is always that it's just pulled down as opposed to taken off completely, just so it doesn't fall on the ground or, all the things that can happen to it. If we have a classroom where the guidelines say 6 feet, if feasible, it's unclear to us. We do not have any direction, not just me, but all superintendents, as to what that means, what's feasible. And that makes us very uncomfortable because one may say, okay, 5 feet would still be acceptable. One may say 3 feet may still be acceptable, as the initial guidelines from the CDC came out saying 3 to 6. So we're not, nobody is sure, nobody agrees on that. So out of an overabundance of caution, if they're not definitely 6 feet apart, they'll have to have their masks on, because we know those two techniques together help to mitigate. And again, hand washing is really important too. Wherever kids are touching, if they can get contagion and dirt and germs off of their hands, if they touch their faces or anything like that, they're not, bringing that into their bodies. And the same thing before they go to touch things, so that if they have touched their mouths or their faces in any way, they're not spreading it and leaving it on other surfaces. So, we're measuring out the rooms. We know that some classrooms may need to change because a classroom that's a little larger, that has fewer number of students, and we can get more desks in there, then the switch has to happen. Or we may need to move that to a different space within the building. So, we're making every effort and planning for 6 feet. We know that if kids are in the hallway, And even if there are little markers for them to stand on, they're kids. So it's better for them to have their masks on. So in case they step off of their box, you know, it's not just protecting them, it's more so protecting everybody else. And that includes the staff. There's, you know, again, not much, there's research coming out right now. The kids don't seem to contract this and as fast and as and develop as severe symptoms, with the exception of students that might have, or children that might have had underlying health conditions. You know, sometimes parents don't even know until they get sick like this. So, you know, that's what research is saying. We know that it's more of a risk for adults, but we don't know necessarily if children are the ones transmitting it to adults. That they're still studying this. And, you know, we're going to continue to revise and iterate our plans based on, you know, what the latest science is telling us, and having that relationship with the two hospitals in the area is very helpful, because we have access to actual professionals and not just having to rely on what we're seeing on the news or reading in the paper. Because oftentimes, you know, it's not that it's not accurate, it just isn't all the details that we need to make the decisions. And, you know, so if this is something that leaves parents uncomfortable and you're considering a virtual option, we understand. We completely understand. We would hope that you truly explore our eSchool for the benefits that it has to both you, the student, and to the district. But at the end of the day, it's your option as a parent to do what you feel is best for your child.
The next question is a good one. Asking specifically, Dr. Polanchak, about Title I support. And if I can interject, it's typically a pull-out in a separate location, small group. Not that it can't be done push in, as I would say to you, but the question does ask, do you anticipate changes to Title I and how it might be challenging to work so closely in a small group session for reading or math skills?
Yes. So, you know, we may be looking more at the push in than the pull out. Now, again, you know, it depends on the student's need. The goal really with the Title I, the reading support that the students are getting, is they need to be taught that skill in a different way than the other students, because they already got that instruction and their brains just don't learn that way. So how a teacher can do that, or even the teacher being more one-on-one, one-on-two, where that can be monitored, instead of having a group of 6 students at that kidney-shaped table, she may have to cut that into half. So she only has 3, so there's more distance. We are looking again with those plastic desk partitions, you know, that may help. So if they're not exactly 6 feet apart, they have an extra barrier there. But we also know that, you know, when we're talking about reading, and I have a background as a reading specialist, that so much happens with how you're helping students understand how they form language and sounds with their mouth, as would certainly happen with speech therapy. So, you know, we may even look and need to purchase clear masks. They look a little creepy, to tell you the truth, but, you know, that might be something that we look to do, where it's just the mouth has a clear plastic and the rest is fabric, so that we can have that barrier there, but the teacher can still see the student's mouth to be able to correct anything that the student, you know, may need to do.
Another one that is a good one that we've not been asked before are students that have food allergies. And we're talking about modifying some cafeteria procedures, but eating back in the classroom, the guarantee of remaining food allergen free as required in this particular student's 504 is an important point of consideration.
Right. And when we're looking at our classroom assignments, and that's part of what our principals are looking, besides the balance of student needs, boy-girl ratios, you know, if we know that we have a student that has a particular, you know, I'll pick peanut allergy, because that tends to be pretty common. I don't know specifically what your child's allergy may be, but all those same precautions have to be in place. We may also ask that, based on what we're planning to do, it may be a good idea to run that by the child's physician to see, is this adequate, or do we need to do something else? We don't want an experiment and to find out what we're doing and you may agree to, and then find out that, no, we need something extra because of the severity of the illness or the allergy. We think that's the best dialogue. Your physician would know best what your child specifically needs. And if you're comfortable having them clear our plan for that in the classroom, then we're fine with that as well too. It's all about making sure the child, doesn't have an episode.
Thank you. The question posed is, will the district need some fraction of students to choose the e-school in order to have enough social distancing room for the in-person students?
We know that if we have 10 to 15% per grade level, that we can assign a Lewisburg area school district teacher to that section. So if I have 20 first graders that go to the e-school, then I know I can reassign one of my first grade teachers to that, and possibly a little more. I'm just ballparking numbers here based on how many teachers we have per section. So we do know that. What we're looking at within the classrooms is, again, with everything coming out of the classroom, there's much more space than one might think, because I'm thinking of kindergarten, where you have the kitchen set and you have all the stations that happen for learning. Kids, we're going to have to look at a different way to do that, because the kids can't gather there. And that may be eliminated from part of the program for this year, just in the interest of safety. But what we're looking to do is move classrooms possibly around where that section might be a little larger. We do know that, we have parents who are going to be choosing an e-school option. They've been reaching out to us. I don't have an exact number, but, we hope to have that, within the next 2 weeks or so. And, it's up to us to make those accommodations as we see fit, using other space in the building to make sure we're getting kids there. But, in some cases, I'll be honest, you might be, for that one desk or, one classroom might be closer to 5.5 feet than 6. And then that's going to be the class where we always have to have the masks up. But we'll take into consideration, other factors as to what that class might be. It might be older students who can do that, or a classroom that's not getting direct sunlight beating on it to make it more uncomfortable. So that's all part of, as we're assessing this. We can't tell you this exactly, because no school district will tell you their exact plan for the day-to-day movement of some things, because some of that's also part of our general safety plan that we have. So, just as we have procedures for an intruder drill, as an example, some of those things aren't shared with the public naturally, because you wouldn't want a bad actor knowing what our plan is on the inside. So, as principals are working on this pretty much full-time, day and night, besides classroom assignments and some of the other things, there's nothing else going on but daily planning and thinking about the day in terms of minute by minute, what's every student's experience and where the procedures have to be adjusted so that we can put these mitigation strategies in place.
We have 3 more, and I think we have time to get to them all if I'm quick here. We've talked a lot about masking, but here's the nuanced question. If the teacher is in the front of the room and far from individual students, will they have only a face shield and not a mask?
They could. What we're going to ask teachers to do is have their face shields on. And if they're again, these are little kids. So if we're handwriting, for example, if they're writing on the paper some letters for the student to copy, or correcting as the student's doing, and I'm thinking about this in kid writing, where at some point you write the adult writing on top. They're going to have to get closer to the student in the desk. And then that's the time the mask has to come up. But again, that's not going to be for even 5 minutes. So if they're closer, put the mask back on. If you're at the front of the room, and there will be a lot more teaching from the front of the room, it's going to look different. And that's important for, and we, in our meeting with our elementary teachers this afternoon, that's what we have to have them understand. There's been such an emphasis on collaboration and students working together and moving all around the room. It's going to look, unfortunately, what would be, and I'm putting in air quotes, traditional school, where the teacher's at the front of the room and the students are at the desk. but they're going to have to develop procedures for those little wiggle breaks, and the kids won't sit still for 6 straight hours. We absolutely know that. And they didn't even in the old days. But, you know, teachers will work through that. They're already thinking about that. And I know that our folks will rise to the occasion.
I'd like to take the next one myself. It does ask about the dyslexia pilot that we are due to begin at Kelly Elementary with the start of the school year. And I am pleased to be able to say our teachers continue to train. The answer to the question is we are moving forward. What we'll have to take serious look at is how we design the opportunities and the timing to work with the students. But the training piece on the back end for our entire K-2 staff will be accomplished here till the end of our summer professional development. And so then the next step will be figuring out just how we can begin to go forward and work even under the kinds of conditions that we've outlined that our rooms look like and our student interaction looks like. But we know we are not giving up on it. And yes, we want to proceed to go forward. And of course, the details are what we need to work on. The last question that has come in to us is the consideration to delaying the start of school until after Labor Day, as other schools are doing, perhaps would address the issues of heat, masks, and give parents more time to make decisions for their child.
So I'm not sure why some school districts have done that. And again, you know, I want to say that they may, in their planning, not feel like they would be ready to start school because they may be waiting for equipment. They may be waiting for some things. At this point, we feel as though we can start at that time. If anything changes or we get new information, and again, this is all contingent upon what is happening here in the county. If it's unsafe to start, then, you know, we would certainly look for a delay. And we can do that. Our considerations also have to be is that if we delay, we're also pushing those days into the spring, and we're coming into the same issue with heat, albeit not always as bad as what we see. And, you know, the initial thought around this is that if we get too hot, then we're going to take a look at how we can maybe, you know, activate those half days to get some instruction in, and then not, you know, have students in the middle of the afternoon being, and staff too, being terribly uncomfortable. So, you know, every school district's making decisions for reasons that are public, but also a myriad of internal reasons that they feel that they need to do that. Parents, you know, we're going to ask for a time. The parents are making a commitment, but parents, if they want for their students to start in e-school and then transition back, they certainly are welcome to do that as well.
Dr. Polinchak, that's all the questions in our 2 locations, the chat and the Q&A.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your time. I hope that I did answer some of your questions. If you have additional questions, please do feel free to email me if they're general. If it's something unique and specific to your child's education plan, please send that forward to Pamela Kramer, because I will just simply forward it to Pamela Kramer. I can't speak to your child's IEP. I'm not part of the IEP team, and I can't make decisions outside for your child of the IEP team. Certainly, if there's an issue about how things are going, I become involved in that as the superintendent with the district, but I can't override a decision of the IEP. And I will, if you do have questions, I am responding to questions. I've gotten numerous just individualized questions. I'm trying to get back to every email. It's going to take me a couple of days to do so, but you know, if you have emailed me or you will email me, you will hear back from me. So I do hope you have a good morning, and as we're moving into afternoon soon, and take care. Okay, bye-bye.